Bless you for being in our schools, our K-12 schools. Thank you so much. Both my parents were educators, and I thought that's where I would land, and they convinced me not to, but I fought my way back and have landed on the college students. So really, I have four kids. I have a freshman in college, I have two in high school, and I have a sixth grader. So as I kind of approached kind of these resources, I really drew off what they're learning in their accounting classes and their business classes and the experience that I've had both as a CPA and then teaching tax at the college level to make sure that I kind of helped come up with ideas that you could implement. There's no multiple choice, there's no quick answer, kind of working with our tax code and tax laws to help develop ideas that they can use and work on presentations and research and things like that. So I don't know how informal these typically are. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. I have more than enough content to talk all night. So you also have to stop me if it gets too in depth. So I apologize for that. Just quickly provide an overview of tax. I'm sure you've seen this a number of times. Um, Most importantly to me, I want to help identify the pieces of tax that I feel are most relevant to high school students. Because if you talk about a concept that they're not going to have to get their arms around for 5 years, if we're talking about property tax, but they don't own any property to pay taxes on, I think we really missed the opportunity for the learning experience of it. So again, as you can see, as we move through the slides, really tried to identify relevant pieces that will affect them now, high school students now in the tax world, because there are quite a few. And then I have some resources and different opportunities for research. So again, this is kind of the big picture. I know you've seen this before. Probably every time you start talking about tax, you have to start here. We pay taxes on what you earn, what you buy, and what you own, right? So this is kind of the summary that I came up with. What you earn is the federal and state income taxes. I certainly think that's applicable to our students. Payroll taxes, I think that's applicable to our high school students. Now, capital gains tax, it's important. There's some really, really cool planning that we can do. I do them in my college classes to talk about timing and, different opportunities to use capital losses to offset capital gains. But in my opinion, probably not relevant to majority of high school students right now. So I left that one alone, but certainly a tax on something that you earn. Then we have sales and excise taxes. Sales taxes are certainly relevant. So I have a couple ideas other than I think what my kids have done is like calculate sales tax. A couple ideas for research and different conversations that you can have within your communities. And then these two I left alone for the most part because really a student in high school, they may own a car, they may live in a house that one of their family members owns, but there's not a lot of opportunities to discuss property taxes. So really left this one alone, but there's opportunities certainly if you want to dig in. I will share my slide deck. Here's a list of some resources. The EverFi one up top, I was not familiar with that. Colin, it's epic. So I do suggest kind of using that as a base to have the whole holistic tax conversation. Okay, lots of bullets here. So this, I'm just going to start spitballing ideas of different ways that I think that you can make connections to some of those taxes that I highlighted to be most important. Um, state sales tax typically is fascinating, and it comes up with a lot of really funny conversations and stories because each state, of course, we have our federal tax, and that's tough and confusing and hard and creates a lot of challenges, job security in my world, certainly. But then we have all the different 50 states that have their own set of rules. So if you start having students do some research surrounding different state taxes, sales tax in particular, that different states have, it turns into some pretty funny conversations of, Skittles are not taxed, but a Snickers is. Or if you're going for a hot air balloon ride and you stay tethered to the ground, you don't have tax. But if you untether and actually go on a hot air balloon ride, that is taxed. So kind of the fun piece that you can pick up, and there's some websites that you can Google. I did not provide those websites, different things that you can Google, and just bring kind of the humor into it to kind of demonstrate the complexity and why it's so important to have a solid foundation and understanding of what is being taxed and why. So then students can start kind of experiencing that, and then they have hopefully a little motivation to learn a little bit more. Over in Greece, they tax, you have like significant property taxes if you have a pool. I thought that one was a little funny. So they've kind of circumvented that by evidently, I've not haven't witnessed this, but kind of creating these elaborate fences to keep the taxing authority out from being able to see their pool in their backyard. But now the taxing authority is, coming and approaching their assessment by using drones. So really hard to miss the fact that someone has a pool if they have a drone. So just kind of that tension and conversation that you can have is kind of funny surrounding some of those different state sales taxes. I provided you a link to a website, the Tax Foundation. Now, when I'm in practice, like I legitimately use this site. So it does get pretty deep pretty fast, but they do have an education piece also on their website. And again, you can just Google Tax Foundation quick if you want to take a look. There are so many really, really cool visual state maps. So again, demonstrates how differently things are taxed across the country. Cell phone usage, cell phone tax, employment tax, obviously, uh, let's see, income tax, corporate income tax, every tax that you can envision. They've done some really great heat maps kind of demonstrating, who has the best tax position, who, kind of pays the worst, the highest amount of tax. So I envision in my mind some really cool conversations surrounding that. What ultimately can we say that there is what's the most tax-friendly state to live in, right? And can kind of develop a research project and some conversations and presentations around that. Because just because I'm not paying high income taxes in one state doesn't mean I'm not paying higher property taxes to offset that revenue. So that's kind of why I provided that. I see a cool conversation happening there. TCJA in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Job Act, that was huge legislation that came around during President Trump's first time as president. It was set to expire. A lot of the provisions in that legislation were set to expire at the end of this year, 2025. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. I'm just going to leave it there. There's going to be so many conversations in the media and current events happening surrounding TCJA. So if you're into current events, if you are interested in having students do a little research surrounding that, that's a fantastic topic. You can even take it back prior to 2027 to start researching what the changes were. I will tell you one of the most common or the biggest the change that affected your students probably the most, and it'd be your students' parents obviously, was the change in the standard deduction amount. It was increased. So a lot of folks, myself included, I don't know about you all, I own a home, I have a mortgage. Typically up to this point, that would be prime indication they're going to itemize, right, on Schedule A. And with the increase in standard deduction, they actually took those exemption amounts away. That creates kind of a cool place to research and a lot of conversations that you can have around itemizing and the standard deduction amount, which is certainly applicable to this age group. I just as a quick little, if you have 20, 15 extra minutes at the end of your class, have them start researching the deductibility of different things, right? So interest is always a good place to start. Student loan interest is deductible in some cases. Mortgage interest is deductible in some cases. You can tie that back to, guess what? Credit card interest is not deductible, and kind of fill in why we have different types of debt, and some debt is good debt and some debt is bad debt. I think that's a fun one just to fill up a little extra time if you have it. assuming they have access to computers and all those things. So you can kind of tie some of those conversations into other personal finance topics. This is a good one. This research find tax advice or a planning strategy on social media and determine if it's legitimate. This actually made the IRS's Dirty Dozen list, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Like their biggest warning list of don't pay attention to tax advice that you get on social media. So, meet them where they are. The students obviously are very entrenched in social media, so have them find someone who is providing tax advice and have them spend a few minutes, 20 minutes, and do a presentation as to why it is a legitimate strategy or why it may end up being a really bad strategy overall. This one, and I don't know how much research and history you're interested in. As I've done this for as many years as I have, it's interesting to see the progression of how things change. So if anybody remembers a world pre-Amazon or at the beginning of Amazon, you will remember, hopefully, that you didn't have to pay sales tax on things that you bought from Amazon, right? So how did that change? And that came about with a Supreme Court case, which also is pretty interesting to research, I think, kind of how the Supreme Court plays a factor in guiding our tax law. But it's the South Dakota versus Wayfair case. So this really changed the landscape of e-commerce. And I mean, I envision kind of having students create some sort of timeline, right? Like this is when you used to order office supplies through a book, right? It was the book called Quill, and that had actually been to the courts as well to say, hey, if I'm in Iowa and I buy something from North Dakota, I don't have to pay tax. So really, the history that's been in the making with the internet and e-commerce is really fascinating to see how tax catches up to that. And if you just Google it, there are so many explanations of that I think that's really doable for a high school student to kind of grasp the change in technology and how the tax policy has had to keep up with that. And then you can continue to do a little additional research. There's no tax right now on like digital content, digital assets and things like that, sales tax as far as that's concerned. So that would be an interesting kind of what do we expect to happen over the course of the next 5 to 10 years? What's on the horizon and how is tax going to catch up to that as well? Um, For sales tax, I think sales tax is certainly applicable. Like I said, I don't think it's important to learn how to calculate and file a sales tax return because that is actually, it's our money, right? As we have that transaction, but the business is withholding it for us and submitting it on our behalf. So I don't think that process is necessarily important for a high school student. But I just kind of thought of maybe we could have the students collect their receipts or take pictures of the receipts over, 3 weeks or 4 months or 4 weeks, 3 weeks or a month. And then you can kind of compile them and see how much sales tax was actually paid in your area. Follow that up. In my mind, I thought this would be kind of cool with a speaker from your local government. I live in a town of 5,000. So calling the city administrator to come speak to our class to talk about, not the filing of by any means, but kind of the other side of the conversation, right? Not the submission, but what they actually do with the tax revenues. So it would be a really great conversation to talk about that tax cycle of I pay it, where is it going? How is it being allocated? What in our community can we see that's tangible that, our tax dollars are going to? So that combination would be kind of a cool semester long project where you actually have them say the receipts and then talk to someone, a city official, to kind of talk about budgeting and the incoming tax revenues that they have. Really think that you could do some fun data analysis with that as well to kind of dig a little deeper to see, what are they spending their money on? McDonald's, Subway, Quick Star, gas. Where is that money being allocated and how are those sales tax dollars being collected? Finally, and like I said, I'm just kind of throwing ideas out to you. You'll have this slide deck if you want to go back and reference. Instead of talking to CPAs and people that are actually preparing returns, because they're talking up here, right? Talk to small business owners up and down Main Street, the ones that are struggling to figure out how to file or struggling to figure out how to set their prices accordingly, so they can still attract business and then also meet their tax responsibilities. So more than anything, that those small business owners, talk to them about tax planning and how taxes impact their profitability. So digging a little deeper in some of the taxes that I think that I would hope that my high school students are walking away having a little better understanding of, things that are relevant to them right now, payroll taxes. Okay. So they really need to understand if they are going to be a W-2 employee or if they're going to be an independent contractor. So there's all kinds of information on the IRS website to help you determine what you are. Independent contractors get a 1099, right? So have them do a little bit of research to determine what the difference is and why you would get one over the other, advantages and disadvantages to them. Of course, it comes down to who's taking care of the FICA, right? So that provides another opportunity to define FICA, talk about Social Security, talk about Medicare. Feel free to have them calculate this. I think it's a decent exercise because it's a flat rate. The beauty of being an employee is you only have to pay half, right? If you are a 1099 independent contractor, you have to pay both sides because you are independent, you don't have an employer, so you're paying self-employment tax. So if you want to do some calculations, it really would be beneficial to show the difference, right? Because there is pretty significant tax savings. Just looking at that perspective, there is significant tax savings if you are a W-2 employee. Kind of that importance of who is submitting and why. So again, the why is to help fund our Social Security, Medicare. That is not overly relevant for them right now, right? They don't get to touch that for another 50 years. But how it's being submitted, I think, is incredibly important. So the employer submits both of that. They withhold it from your taxes. You can see it on a paycheck stub, right? Your portion being withheld from your take-home pay. I know that's a conversation that I've had with both of my kids that have had jobs. They're making $19 an hour and they're like, what? Even though we talked about it multiple times, it really doesn't hit home until they actually see that paycheck and see that their take-home pay is reduced pretty significantly. So help them understand the why. Lots of scary things could happen if you are a 1099 employee because you are required to pay your own withholding. Okay, so if they're making estimated payments or if they're going to take care of that at the end of the year on their 1040, they have to know that it's their responsibility, both sides of that, the employee and the employer portion, and they have to submit it. There's no one there because they don't have an employee or they don't have an employer. So you can do a lot of exercises around that. This would be one place where I would spend a pretty significant amount of time so they are well aware of how all this works. Because it is shocking. You don't have the ability to change it. These are flat rates, right? The only kind of variable you have is how much you pay in if you are an independent contractor. Also, I really think it's great to look into Social Security and Medicare. Not so much the doomsday that I heard that it wasn't going to be around when I was there for retirement, but to have a really good understanding of why it's there, what your money is going to, right? I think it's important to kind of drive home that cycle of I'm taking this money out, I'm paying these taxes, tell me why, right? Whether we can follow the dollars or not, we can have a better sense of what the Social Security is, what Medicare is. And really all this stuff is available on the websites. I did not link these two, but Social Security planning, because they've changed the ages so much over the last 10 or 15 years, there really is some planning that could go into it. So that might be beneficial for some folks that have family members that are questioning whether they should retire and take Social Security or if they should their defer their payments or not. Okay, so that was payroll, FICA, Medicare, and Social Security. Income tax, obviously really important as well. The IRS, all of their instructions and such are written in an eighth grade level, reading level. So they should be able to interpret them. And really, all the information that they need to file a return is available on the IRS website. So lots of calculators, lots of check my stuff, plug in how much I have in wages, how much I have in income, and determine whether I have to file a return. So this is a link to that to determine if you need to file or not. Make sure that they are gaining familiarity with the forms, instructions, publications. It's a wealth of information. And again, it's all at their fingertips. They do not need to pay hundreds of dollars to a CPA to get this done. This is all federal, so don't forget they have state filing requirements. So state of Iowa has a revenue site as well that's easily accessible, right? Maybe not as easy, but all the information you need is out there. Even if there is not a filing requirement, if they are told that they don't have to file necessarily, make sure that they understand the importance. If they've had anything withheld, federal or state tax, that they may want to file to get their refund. I would love it if every student in Iowa walked away knowing that and didn't leave money with the federal government or with the state government. So if they've had any sort of withholding, even if they don't have to file, they do need to file to get that refund.
Jen,
Understand dependency rules. This is a big one, not because necessarily they have a dependent, but over the course of the next couple years as they go to college or if they start employment, they have to decide, they have to determine whether they are a dependent of their parents. So that's a really good one that you could really drive home and study. Lots of tension at home with mom and dad, right? I'm sure that parents, majority of the time, want to save the dependents as long as they can. But there's some real conversations to say, is it a legitimate dependent or not, right? So there's some really good tests that they can do. The IRS has some good calculators as well. And practice. I've included this link here, and I'll show you towards the end, just because I know we'll have time to talk. Uh, if you have to file a tax return once a year, and your tax situation is changing from year to year, it gets overwhelming and crazy and nuts. So I've done this a couple times in my tax classes. Just go to ChatGPT or whatever AI you decide to use and ask the AI world to create some tax scenarios for you. So you can say a single parent with, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old making X amount of dollars, and they do a really great job kind of creating some tax facts for you. Have your students practice on that, right? So come up with 5 or 6. You can tweak them here and there and have them kind of practice on this tax spreadsheet that I'm going to show you, and create presentations on that. Pretend like you're having conversations with clients, justify what the filing status is, justify why you have dependents, talk about what tax bracket you're in, talk about any planning opportunities that they may have, kind of working through that. Have them practice getting the numbers in the right place so it becomes a habit and it's not super daunting when they get all their tax information at the beginning of the year.
Jenny, I'm going to stop you for just one
Yeah.
second. Um, and like all this is amazing. I just wondered if anybody had any questions so far in anything Jenny's talked about up until this point. Um, and then maybe we'll target maybe 5 more minutes-ish. And I know that we've burdened you with like, tell us everything, and these are all so amazing. Um, ideas, and I love that you have all these links for us. Was there anyone that had a question so far, or is it okay if Jenny just continues on here for about 5 more minutes and then we'll kind of have some back and forth discussion?
All right, so Mike provided a great calculator there, so thanks for sharing that, Mike. Absolutely. And use that to help them kind of complete a W-4. So again, you can go to AI, whatever AI you choose to use, and instead of just having them do it for themselves, actually put the scenario into ChatGPT and get, little vignettes. You can have one for each student, right? So print a dozen and actually have them go through the process of completing a W-4 and then seeing what that may look like at the end of the day, and what the impact is on that 1040. So
Great idea.
that's the full circle. And of course, I don't know if you guys are familiar with VITA, voluntary income tax assistance. If you have one in your community and you have students that kind of have interest in learning a little bit more, I'm pretty sure that you can do it before you're 18. I don't hold me to that, but those students that are graduating or seniors, older seniors, could participate in VITA and actually prepare tax returns for folks in your community if you have that. This is kind of the fun piece. Like, let's put a little fear in them and help them understand why we're doing all this. I think that's hugely important, right? We can drone on all day. You got to file your tax return. You have to have a firm understanding of taxes, but have a little fun with the fear factor. Have them explore what the penalties are, uh, interest that may be accrued if you are underpaid. I mean, you can people go to jail all the time for, tax evasion and things. Um, go to the IRS website. There's a news room, or just even Google, like tax fraud cases, tax fraud court cases, sorry, or failure to file court cases. Uh, it's a wealth, and you get the tax court docket most of the time, which is kind of hard to navigate. But in a lot of cases, a lot of times, CPA firms have done a really good summary. So it's kind of a fun talking point of how can people be that blatantly silly by, making millions of dollars and then just coming up with some excuse not to report it to the government. So that's again the fear factor because they're, these folks sometimes are owing hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest and penalties. And then, you don't want to mess with the IRS, right? The IRS will get you eventually. They've got access to your bank account number. So, just kind of that fear factor, I think, is kind of a fun place to sit as a teacher to demonstrate the importance of why we are actually taking the time to file our taxes because it's the law. Statute of limitations, I have it here, search for failure to file tax court cases. Just be aware that the IRS generally wins. Make sure that they're aware of tax scams. That kind of goes along with that social media piece. Uh, this is hugely important. The second to last bullet, make sure that they're protecting their personal information. My kids do not know their social security number. I'm sure it's written down somewhere in their wallets. Um, but just there is so much fraud going on these days. Like that's something else that they can walk away understanding what their responsibility is to file a 1040 and they have to protect their own personal financial information. It's hugely important. And then this dirty dozen, the IRS provides a list every year of the 12 biggest tax frauds. Again, kind of funny, that shock value of what's going on. Last one, and I'll be done, I think. Tax planning. So if you want to get into that kind of forward thinking, I have used this so many times in class, and it's hugely impactful. Have them research the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, and actually have them get into Excel and do some modeling so they can see that a traditional IRA is deductible up front, right? They can see that they're both tax deferred, right? Where we go the length of our investment without paying taxes on them from year to year. And then you can see that a Roth is tax free upon distributions. And you can really start to get a good understanding of what the benefits are of those. And really, I think tie them into so many conversations of savings and investing, and you can build in Excel modeling there as well. A lot of the big investment companies actually have calculators on their website that I've found to be helpful too, if you don't want to go into the Excel modeling. But just again, the comparison of side by side, this might not be applicable to them right now, but it certainly will be in the next 5 years as they get jobs and start saving for their retirement.
Jenny, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I love the links that are right there. You gave me some really great ideas and fun ideas for kids. I think really captures their attention for that. So thank you so much.